Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Insights Lounge by Mindcore, a strategy consulting and market research firm. And today we have with us Mr. Sandesh Jadhav, the Global Data Privacy Officer at Wipro, where he leads privacy and data protection initiatives across more than 60 countries. He brings extensive experience across telecom, IT services, and consulting, specializing in data privacy, cybersecurity, and regulatory compliance. He's also the honorary professor at the AU School of Law, where Mr. Jadhav leads the university's executive and postgraduate offerings in data privacy, AI, governance, and technology law. Welcome, Mr. Sandesh Jadhav.
Thank you, Kanika. Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure. So the theme of today's podcast is defining the future of AI, data privacy, and cybersecurity. So I'm going to just jump into the questions that we have today. Mr. Sandesh, which milestones in your journey guide you in how you evaluate AI projects today?
Yeah, so there are various milestones in my journey. When I started my journey, I started with the aircraft communication engineering, and then I moved into cybersecurity, then eventually into GRC, data privacy, and cyber law. So there are various milestones and which are interconnected, where I am going to evaluate my AI projects or the projects which are embedded with AI privacy and data governance. Okay, so these are various milestones in my journey. So this is how I've started, data stewardship, like embedding responsible data stewardship into all of this AI development. Whatever AI project, whatever AI ML models we are designing for various domains. In this, there are a lot of AI initiative, which we take. And you must have been heard that DevOps. Previously, it all started with DevOps, and then it turned into DevSecOps, and then now it's DevSecPrivacyOps. So we are going to initiate all our AI project, which are embedded not only by privacy by design, those will be privacy and ethics by design kind of model. So these are this various milestones through which our AI evaluation should happen.
So as per you, what is the single governance priority which boards should set for privacy and AI?
So there is not a single, I would say there will be hybrid. Okay, there will be hybrid governance policy. So see, there are various governance models currently available in the market. For example, ISO are there, ISO 42000, IEEE standard, IEEE P2863 is there. There is a NIST regulatory framework is there. Then we are having US order, US board's executive orders. Then we were having G7 Hiroshima process AI guiding principle. So if you combine all of this, and then you can make sure that there are few basic principle of privacy and AI governance has to be embedded. For example, in privacy, we have to ensure the data minimization, lawful uses, the trust, which we need to embed it, and that has to be infused with AI components like the bias, explainability, fairness, accountability. So this kind of hybrid framework should be there, and which we can infuse in our AI framework. And there are already few of the established framework in the market, I would say, there is ISO 42001, which is a framework for establishing, implementing, maintaining this kind of AI ML models. And we also have ISO 23894, which identify and mitigate risk. There is a top 10 OWASP for Gen AI and LLM models. So if you collate all these things, there is kind of hybrid governance model which your board should design. I mean, they shouldn't dependent on only one framework. It should be mix of all.
You mentioned some frameworks. There are also any new recent regulatory developments which you think that should be prioritized when it comes to protection, data protection?
So right. So US has mentioned regulatory framework through their executive orders. There are multiple executive orders. Like previously, we used to follow this Biden's, and now Trump's executive order has come for AI framework. That is something a new updates which everyone should look at. Then there is a European Data Protection Board. They have issued a very recent guidelines on data transfer that will be for artificial intelligence models like AI models, as well as processing of the data through blockchain technology. So if you see, data transfer happens for the various domains like medical, finance, defense. So for fintech, the blockchain technology prevails. Okay. Now, in this recent European Data Protection Board, like we call it as the EDPB guidelines, so they have mentioned the term as a supervisory authority. They say so it most likely refers to the guidance provided by National Supervisory Authority of individual nation. So EU Cyber Solidarity Act is one of the act which again recently talks a lot about how the data should be transferred securely across the border. Then we are having something called as EU AI Act, which I spoke earlier, which is risk-based AI regulation, and it imposes a very concrete obligations on providers as well as users of AI. DORA framework is there. China's PIPL has been got integrated recently with CSL and DSL. Like if you make any contract with China, then don't go only with this PIPL guidelines. They also integrate those with CSL and DSL, like China's security laws as well as their data protection law. So, like, how the board should take action or this organization should take action is like, they should identify this AI inventory. They should classify them based on the high risk or Gen AI for compliance. They should give the legal sign off. And this kind of recent regulatory development, they should look at that what exactly each and every country requires. Because whenever we transfer is happening across the globe. So the law of the land or the law of those respective countries has to be taken into consideration. For example, in our India DPDP, the data localization laws are prevail. Now, during this data localization law, also the TRI guidelines or the Telecom Authority guidelines has to be prevail. So those are country-specific guidelines which prevail. There are, say, for example, in USA, there are federal direction or there are comprehensive state privacy laws are there. There are various executive orders are there. So in this entire ecosystem, we need to check what's going to suit my requirement. For example, if you want to do a financial transaction or fintech in EU, then you have to see all the updates from the DORA framework. So there is not specific answer for the specific country. It changes country to country, and it's also changes as per domain.
Understood. So it has to be country specific.
Yes.
You briefly touched upon the DPDP Act, India's DPDP Act 2023. If we just consider that, can you suggest what would be the top three actions that organizations should prioritize to meet this from a compliance perspective and to reduce regulatory exposure?
Okay. Now, where DPDP Act, like in their order, like in their clauses, they have mentioned about notices, about consent management. Okay. They have already prioritized what are the things which are required. But if you ask me, like how I look at this DPDP Act, from my perspective, it should be deploy the reasonable security measures. That should be the very first most priority. Why I'm saying this? Because if you follow this China's PIPL, as I mentioned earlier, they don't talk only about the privacy. Apart from privacy, whenever they speak about the segregation of data, like PI data, sensitive PI data, then they also talk about after segregation of PI data, how you should treat that data. That's the reason they don't go only with their privacy laws, the PIPL. They also go along with CSL and DSL laws. What it means, I will give you one example. In China, you don't have a BYOK, like bring your own key kind of concept. Whenever you are going to put up data in any of the Chinese data center, the key also will be managed by the China company. Like you cannot take your key outside China. Okay, so this kind of concept is there. So from my perspective, the reasonable security measures should be the priority. Even in new SCC, like for the EU, the new standard contractual clauses talks about the take and org measures. What are those take and org measures? They are nothing but the cyber security measure or infosec measure. So from my perspective, the first and foremost thing should be the deploy reasonable security measure like encryption, access control, logging, backups. You can follow our NIST framework or ISO framework. That is the first thing. Then establish the breach detection and reporting framework. So this is something which like the rules are on their way. We have still not implemented the rules. We means I'm talking about this, like behalf of entire ecosystem, like entire market. They have not implemented the rules, but they talks about like within some specific time of discovering a personal data breach, we need to promptly inform the data protection board. Now this has to be go along with hand in hand with the certain guidelines. That what are your uh, the reporting hours, like 6 hours is the time for certain. So I think like data protection board has to work like it will work, I think, closely with a certain guidelines. That is the second thing. And third thing which I would like to emphasize is on maintaining the audit ready records. So the audit trails or the traceability. So whenever any customer or any cross border data transfer happen, so any outside business partner or customer want to do audit of Indian ecosystem, we should be audit ready, and we should like competent enough to pass on their DPIs or their data mapping exercises. So these are the three prioritized things I should mention through the DPDP Act.
And which processes or documentation do you think offer the greatest potential for alignment while minimizing redundancy in compliance efforts?
So see, we have taken like not only DPDP, like because GDPR is the first law which got enacted. All other regulation which got enacted after GDPR, they have taken few references or few guidelines from the GDPR. So data inventory or records of processing activities like ROPA. So this kind of documentation should be prioritized. This I feel. For example, GDPR requires a detailed ROPA under Article 30. So similar guideline we should follow. Why ROPA? Because ROPA explains all the processing activities as well as the updates as well as the change management requests, whatever changes has been taken in that particular application or in that particular process. All that things has been explained in the ROPA. ROPA is acting as a Bible or is acting as a guideline, is acting as a syllabus under which I am going to know that how my data is passing from A point to B point. What are the data points it get touched? What are the geographies it touch? How this entire data flow happen? How secured my data is getting flowing? Say for example, I always emphasize to implement or to mention about the secure data network architecture. This was the first thing whenever I used to carry out ISO or SOC 2 Type 2 audit. So once I'm having an entire picture of how my data is getting flowing and how securely my data is getting flowed, so all those things has to be mentioned in my ROPA. This kind of documents are required, and there has to be a single data inventory for this kind of purpose. Like there may be different application inventory. You might have identified tier 2, tier 3 kind of application. There are few applications which sit in your DMZ zone. Like, few applications sits at the public facing. Few of the core banking kind of applications sits in your internal zone. So all this data mapping has to be done. The data categories has to be mentioned. The data segregation has to be done based on PI data, super sensitive PI data, the high risk data, the high risk AI data, and then where this data is getting flowed. Like if is it crossing the border, and if it is crossing the border, which border it's crossing. There should be single DSR workflow. Those should be documented. There should be common vendor template or common templates where if one of my vendor is keeping my data in EU, his BCPDR plan, his backup data center is in US. And he has also outsourced sub-processing his data for some business analytics or some AI purpose in China. So documentation perspective, I cannot sign a different countries, under PIPL, under GDPR, under CPRA. So there should be a global vendor contract which covers all these, principles, say, of GDPR, CPR, China's PIPL, or for that matter, even our DPDP Act. It should cover all. So this kind of documentation we should make ready. And at the same time, they should be legally compliant. I mean, it's not like it's only my organization specific or my business requirement specific. It should be talks the legal language. So all these documents should talk what the law of the land that respective countries is asked for.
And in your experience, how many companies are actually ready with such, overarching documentation, which sort of takes care of all the major acts and laws across countries and continents?
So you can see our Indian technology company, we are always on this other side of the river. Like we were at the receiving end. We were
Mhm.
processing data of all this country. So all the tech organizations are already ready even before DPDP acts got enacted. We already had our bill in the draft stage. So we knew what are the things which are coming. And since we were transferring data or we were processing data from Europe, US, UK, so all tech organizations are already ready. I would suggest, I would like from my perspective, all tech organizations or the ITES, the IT enabled service sector, and all the major banking industry, whoever is are working cross border, like fintech, they are mostly working cross border. They are also having their subsidiaries in UK, US, this kind of advanced countries. So a lot of fintech organization, our technology companies, our telecom companies, they are already compliant. They knows that what goes in the global market. So they are already compliant with all the regulations.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, well, let's talk about AI and AI systems. So today, when regulators assess AI systems, what practical evidence do they expect, for example, on DPIAs, audit trails, model testing, or government records?
Yeah, so see, they come whenever regulator come, they just don't want to show the documents like PDF. They want to see how organization is actually following any structured process or they considered or record which are transparent enough, like what kind of AIML model you are using. So they monitor the test and the governance. So how are they doing it? They are doing, as you said correctly, through DPIs. They are not only checking the AI impact assessment, but they also check the algorithmic impact assessment. What it says, we should have our model card ready, which our AIML model cards, which should tell the purpose. The purpose should be clear. It should have lawful basis. It's not like it's my company's SOP. That's the reason I'm doing this. Like a lot of our vendor, whenever we deal with our business partner in my previous organization, I used to wear a hat of auditor. And I used to ask this question that why this particular kind of SOP you have created? They said our board has decided. But is it having the lawful basis? So whenever board decides something, board should also have the GC sitting next to him. GC means General Counsel. So is gone are the days where the CISO and GC and Chief AI Governance Officer used to sit outside board meetings. Now they are part of the board. So you should take from them the lawful basis. What is if I'm writing a few of the SOPs, does it give justice to the regulatory as well as the legal requirement? That is the first thing. Those kind of model cards should be ready. The categories of data used that should be clearly mentioned. The assessment is going to be based on fairness, bias, discrimination risk, and the social and the social impact. So whenever they are going to give input, they are going to check the system. They might be X category, like X religion or X ethnicity. They are going to put input with that. What kind of output it gives? Is it a bias free? Is it a fair? So it's also going to do a bias testing. Explainability technique should be there. It should explain me why this particular input is giving me this specific output. Then there should be sign off of review cycle, like what kind of reviews has been happened at various timestamp. So these are they are going to collect the evidence which are the AI specific risks. They are also going to check if my top 10 OAPs kind of AI security risk for injunction, this kind of risk has got mitigated. So it's not just a generic data or privacy risk. They are going to check all the audit risk for the how your data, your AI ML model has gone to train or validate. All these algorithmic descriptions and algorithmics working, they are going to check.
Makes sense. For high risk AI, what are the essential elements a defensible data protection impact assessment must include today?
Okay. So high risk AI also, this I hear from a lot of our vendors, or whenever I attend the various forums, or I get a lot of speaking opportunity various conferences. So I meet a lot of vendors there. So for them, the high risk AI means the only data which will be health related or biometric or safety or the fundamental rights. No, these fundamental rights, these words they coin. So there is in legal there is a very interesting term called as interpretation of statutes (IOS). So from that perspective, you need to interpret what these fundamental rights are. So now whenever I speak about this term of high risk, it covers all the kind of my PIA data, which not only mention about my health or biometric, but also even if my PFI data, my personal financial information, if it is going to get leaked, how is going to get impact. So high risk AI term, it has to be interpreted in correct way. It's not only HR data or my biometric data or my insurance data. I was interviewing one of the candidate even in my previous assignment for my previous organization. So he was bifurcating my he was giving me answer if my photo get leaked, it's okay. But if my insurance data is getting leaked, that is not okay. So I asked him question, can you be more precise? So he was answering, I asked him, what data is there in your insurance? If any insurer coming to your organization, what kind of data you expose to that insurer? So he says, my nominee, if something goes bad to my life, so who is going to be my nominee? So I asked him, is it going to be a more high risk data than your photo itself? Because your photo is going to have biometric data. If you see the Google photos or your iOS, like in your Apple photos also, if you click on one single photo of your friend, that your Apple or your Google photos is going to identify the other photos of your friend which might be clicked at various timeline, maybe 10 years back you have clicked the friend of your photo, his facial features might be completely changed, but Google or Apple can still identify that you using your eye, your retina, so this kind of data you should first identify what is the high risk. Okay, now coming back to your question for high risk AI. So I was explaining what is a high risk. It's not only your biometric data or your insurance data or your health related data. It's also a data which evades your fundamental right. This I wanted to clear first. Okay. Now, coming back to your question, you ask about what are the essential elements which are a defensible DPIs, which we should include today. So in DPIs, I suggest the AI specific risk needs to be carried out. So your DPIs also should ask the question related to model drifts or what are the data poisoning prevention technique. There are a lot of techniques which can poison my data. So how do I prevent? How do you prevent? I should ask this question to my vendor. How do you prevent the inference risk or the leakage of my training data? If your AI ML model is getting trained, what if the training data only get leaked? Yeah. What about the hallucinations? Now hallucination can lead to the misinformation. So do you have a mechanism in place which is an anti-hallucination? Okay, or disappropriate impact on the vulnerable groups. So this kind of question should be included in my DPIs, or what are the techniques which you have implemented in order to prevent adversarial attacks or model extraction. Okay, then my DPIs should also ask me about the data lineages, the origin, the collection method, the transformation. It should also should ask, while collecting data, was that data was really required for training the model? Or just since you had a chance to collect the data, you just add 10 more fields randomly. So is the data minimization principle has got, included there? The spatial categorization of the data, has the data segregation happen, and if that segregation of data happen, is the segregation of duty happen at the admin level, who will manage what kind of data, who will process what kind of data? If my insurance data I am giving to my HR, apart from HR, are there internal underwriters who know what kind of underwriting policies I'm doing for giving for insurance or for cyber insurance. Apart from underwriters, who are other people in HR who is having access to that data? This all kind of questions should be mentioned in my impact assessment. Like it should also collect the likelihood and severity of my vendors, how often or what is the likelihood of my data is getting breached or leaked from this particular vendor. Yeah. So there, for example, physically where their VM instances are running, all this kind of information should be included in these DPIs.
So, Sandesh, large language models, they expose a lot of sensitive data through memorization and integrity issues. So, what is even Sam Altman recently said that the laws are not there right now, so there's no guarantee that whatever you're speaking with through ChatGPT, for example, where can be misused against you. From an organization point of view, what kind of operational practices can they prioritize to protect data and ensure compliance?
Yeah. So, I asked this in one of the conference. I asked this question to one of the vendor. He was someone. I mean, it was a startup kind of thing, but they were promising a lot of mature AI/ML models to treat our data. So I asked him, uh, "Are you going to forget the data? Like as soon as you learn about my data, like as soon as your AI/ML model got trained." How soon you are going to forget? So he said, to my there are my R&D engineers are working, data scientists are working, but I'm going to sack them if they are not going to retain the data. Who is going to train my AI/ML model? He's what exactly he meant was, in order to make my LLM model mature, it should get trained frequently, right? Now, if you are asking me to forget the data, how I'm supposed to train my AI/ML model? So, in order, coming back to your question, I completely agree. Like a lot of PI data is getting exposed to LLM models and they memorize it. That is their job. If they don't memorize it, how are the things what are the things which they are going to uh, give as output? Okay. So, my suggestion is at the edge, wherever this LLM are getting learned, to block the PI at the edge using present DLP. So you can do ML classifiers. What does this ML classifier does? They segregate the sensitive fields. They never reach to LLM or vector stores because they want pattern. They don't want your PI data. So that patterns, the segregation can be done at the edge itself. They can use the explicit ingestion policies. They can only allow labeled or approved data set to learn. So that we can do that way. We can train our LLM model or we can fine tune them. Whatever, they can take only the labeled data, non-labeled data they have to drop. So that we can do. So preventing entry is far more doable thing. It's a practical also. It's cheaper also, and rather than cleaning. I mean, no one does cleaning of your LLM models later. So it's better to clean it at the entry level also. The isolation of retrieval or the data stores. So, for example, REG boundaries. You can create a kind of REG boundaries there, keeping private data in access controlled retrieval later. For example, if I want to opt out in CPRA, you have the option of opting out. So if my LLM model is getting learned, and if I'm going to fill in that opt-out form, am I having that feasibility of opting out from whatever data my LLM model is learning? No. So create a separate labels or a separate stick queries based on ACL for per query kind of sanitization, which you can do. For forensic sake mode, you can use differential privacy and training time safeguard, or you can use the kind of dummy data. This kind of practices you can use, or a runtime behavioral tool restriction, which can be used, disable model features that increase exposure risk, like kind of public sharing happening. For example, my LLM model is learning a lot of things from newspapers, article, uh, routers kind of portals, so that can be prevented. So these are all mechanisms which you can do. labeling and tagging, which I've already mentioned. These kind of techniques which you can use so that my LLM models cannot be exposed to my PI data.
Mm. And would you also say that there can be some concrete criteria which organizations can use to assess which models to use, or to check their reliability or compliance claims? Because right now there are like so many open models. You have Claude, Gemini, Grok, you name it. Are there any criteria which organizations should use?
So these are these are not only OpenAI model, because Claude, Mistral, Gemini, ChatGPT and all, their codes are not open. A few of the exception, ChatGPT has released GPT OSS 120 B, which is open weight model, or Gemini is using the CLI based technique, which can be. So these models are not actually the open based model, but coming back to your question, the criteria which I can use is performance and task based kind of criteria, where benchmark scores can be done with massive multitask language understanding. So what is mean? So benchmarking is used to evaluate the broad knowledge and reasoning skill which LLMs are using across the academic and professional subjects. There are few data points from which these MMLs are learning the data. There is a kind of big bench criteria, beyond an imitation game benchmark. So what is it? It is a collaborative large scale benchmark which is designed to evaluate the capabilities and limitation of large language models. Okay, there are some domain specific benchmark, those can be used, and we can use the evaluator our own data set, so that can also be done. So while using the model selection, then there are context windows. So there are maximized context windows are available. I think 8K to 200K tokens. What it means is, indirectly this token is nothing but the model of the text which can I give as output. For example, the words, this is number of words, so this is the maximum context windows, is one of the criteria which we utilize. Multimodality needs, so is kind of text only, or it is also giving text plus image, or text plus audio, text plus video. This kind of multi-modality needs can be assessed. Their integration and deployment flexibility, like can I infuse it through normal APIs, can I get integrated with my codes, with my Java programs, with my Python programs. So this kind of thing can be done. My rack pipelines can be checked. API integration I have already mentioned. And then of course there are robustness, their monitoring, or their explainability, or their failovers, or their continuity. So this kind of various criteria on which I can choose my LLM.
Understood. Which specific model and data related documentations are regulators are most likely to request during inquiries or audits? And how can teams prepare to prepare these records?
Yes. So audit trails, they will come and check the audit trails. How are they are going to check the audit trails? They might be ask you, as I mentioned earlier, not only mere PDFs, what are your policies and all. Gone are the days where this BS 777 standard or ISO 27K standard used to come and check your documents or check your PDFs, and they're going to walk away. So they are not going to do this is not going to be era now. So they are going to check your model cards. I've already spoke about the model cards. Testing report, like my hallucination testing, my bias free testing, my AI security testing, my top 10 OAPS testing from LLM and GenAI model. So these kind of testing reports they are going to check. They are also going to check your DPIs and your uh, AI impact assessment reports, as well as your algorithmic impact assessment reports. These are the things which they are going to check. And then they are going to check the intended use, as I mentioned earlier, the legitimate purpose, the intended use for this specific AI ML model. Is it going to be used only for this purpose, or apart from this they are using the other purpose also? So training data records is something which they are going to use. The data provenance logs, they will check the benchmarking against the KPIs which has been defined. So whatever KPIs you have defined for this model, so against agreed KPIs, the validation and testing is happening, or or not. Of course, the bias, fairness, accuracy, or the explainability and transparency criteria. the model versioning and change of logs. Say, for example, which version was in production at a given time and what was it used to do when it was under the testing. This model versioning they are going to check. The full audit trail of updates, retaining, the fine tuning, all those things has been mentioned in your kind of ROPA documents or not. This kind of documents they will check. The interpretability methods, whichever well, whichever methods which you have used, these things they will check. So all these kind of documents they are going to check apart from your normal DPIs assessment report or your retention log or your data deletion log. Apart from this normal DPIs and all checking methods were there, but they're also going to check this human oversight procedures has been, or the whether what type at what point of time the human intervention has been done, or whether there was human in the loop, or the overriding processes were happening or not. So all these things they will check.
That's very interesting. Could you recommend like what kind of governance structure or like a short set of KPIs best demonstrate that the privacy work is actually, operational, is operational and more aligned to business objectives rather than just procedural? I'm just asking from an organization standpoint.
Yeah. Okay. So see, business objective is the one thing, and the requirement of the law, the regulatory compliance is the first, another thing. So there are different KPIs, risk and compliance KPIs are there. There are operational KPIs. There are country-specific culture and country-specific business values KPIs are there. So how do I this, as I at very first question as mentioned, there is one not a common governance structure. It needs to be a very hybrid governance structure. So what kind of structure it should be? So high risk processing activities are getting completed with my proper AI governance framework. What it means? Are they completing my AI impact assessment as well as my DPIs? Okay, what are the regulatory deadlines or guidelines which mates with my subject right requests? Okay. What are my number of sustainable privacy compliance or regulatory inquiries? Are these things are happening in my KPIs or not? What is the percentage of new changes or the delta change happen? For example, I spoke about this EDPD, European Data Protection Board's guidelines. Okay. Now, through lenses of my privacy by design principle, are they applied even before launch? These things I'm going to check under my operational KPI. What are my average times to detect and act upon for my privacy breaches, for my privacy incidents? Is my 24 by 7 kind of SOC or my privacy operation center is in place, in order to uh, uh, address my data breach incidents? What are my cultural and my business values? So are my employee has been trained for privacy completion or my comprehension? For example, in our India also, we even my during my previous organization, a lot of Indian MNCs they could come and ask for the data under some kind of audit, for the labor audit. I want the data, the PI data and PFI data of your employee. That there used to be one technology company, they used to deploy, or the human resources provider company, they used to deploy their resources at one of the manufacturing company, and manufacturing company was big, and that manufacturing company used to ask entire PI and PFI data through this organization, and I was the auditor for this organization who is providing this human resources. Okay. Now the cultural values for that manufacturing company is I am your engineers are coming to my process, my premises. Whatever data I'm asking, you should provide me that. So this was a cultural difference. Now this cultural difference was very much differentiate or tangential of what my data regulations are asking me for. They were asking this data just because their company is having SOP. So this is not the legal basis under which they were asking this data. So my cultural as well as my business values has to be integrated or has to be aligned in my KPIs, where my privacy or AI related training should be done to the auditor, whoever is asking such kind of data. So this kind of training has to be done. My opt-in retention rates has to be defined. my third party contracts or to whomever I am working. So my security clauses has to be enforced. So this kind of KPIs, my security KPIs, my operational KPIs, my regulatory KPIs, my compliance and legal KPIs, all these KPIs has to be collated together under the hybrid governance structure, and which I will again tell you, which I have spoke in my second question, like it has to be country specific, it has to be domain specific, and it should work in a favor of my data subject, because I am dealing with my data subjects data. All this regulation we are doing for whom? For safeguarding whom? To safeguarding my data subjects data. So ideal governance structure should be a structure which, apart from this KPI which I have mentioned, finally, to summarize, like if you ask me to summarize in one line, this governance structure should safeguard PI and PFI data of my data subject.
Makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. This is a lot of good information, Sandesh ji. And as we're coming to the close of the podcast, I have one last question. So, looking into the future, suggest some practical features or capabilities you expect in trusted digital ecosystems that balance innovation, individual privacy, and national interests.
Yeah, so the national interest, the sovereignty is a very important point which you have touched upon. Like in our India DPDP Acts also, a very the point or the one of the clause which I've liked about this our Indian DPDP Act is it talks about the national sovereignty. Under the national sovereignty, if you see how does it started, how does it all started in way back almost 20 years back, when India as a country has started getting this data through our BPO and KPO industry. Now, under this BPO industry, the telecom regulatory authorities are playing a very key role, and they have come up with the principles of the data localization. Now, under this data localization is the key. Some of the practical feature which we should implement, that my PI data should be localized. That is the one thing. Yeah, now I'm talking about the DPDP perspective. Now, from the global perspective, what I'm going to create? I'm going to create a trusted digital ecosystem where we need to reconcile three competing vectors, fast-paced innovation. If my innovation is happening, I cannot tell that my AI model, my AI/ML model is a non-transparent, or it's being a it's being a non-open. I'm not going to use my AI. This we cannot tell. We have to run with the timelines of fast-paced innovation. Strong privacy expectation has started happening from individual. You have seen, though in India also, we can see the changes, but if you talk about the global standards, you all know the shames, how it starts, how the new SEC has started. It all started with the shames. When his PI data on Facebook has asked, he has not replied very positively when he has asked to delete that data. So now my individual privacy expectation has to be done. So this expectation has to be taught to my individual. Like keep the data very minimal on the public interfaces. So we all seen the Naira Energy case. So whenever I'm keeping the data on any country's the company which belongs to some third country, and where I don't have hold. So anything can happen to that. My data will be inaccessible to me in a couple of minutes. In fraction of second, because of some geopolitical risk, any international organization has made my data unavailable to me. Okay, so this kind of thing shouldn't happen. So we should all concentrate on making the Atmanirbhar Bharat, where my PI data should stay with me, and also should stay in control of my company. Though my data is in the border of India, but what if any foreign company is managing that data? That shouldn't happen. This is the second thing. And my legitimate sovereignty. This should happen. It is security concerns of my state. So this is the thing. These are the three major pointers which we should work on. Again, the decentralization of data. There are a lot of paid techniques, which are that technically, like this, I talk about from my sovereignty perspective. Now, technically, I should put up the PAT, my privacy enhancing technology. The decentralization of personal data should happen. If one company is shutting down or if one company is blocking my data, there should be decentralization so that I should get access of my data. My synthetic data layer should be happening for my safe innovation and AI training without exposing to my real PI and PFI data. That should be done. The trust and verifiability has to be happen. My digital provenance infrastructure should be done, which is giving me audit trails. My algorithm should be open. I should get content to verify authenticity, and I should be also detect the manipulation, how it happen. If someone is manipulating about my data, I should easily able to detect it. Cross-border trust framework should happen. My self-verifying AI model should happen with explainability by design, which should tell if I'm going to give one particular kind of input, if it's full of bias, if it's full of hallucination, it shouldn't happen. That real-time assurance should be given. So these are the few of the pointers for future, which I strongly suggest.
That was lovely. Thank you so much, Sandesh. You have shared some very valuable insights today. I am sure that people who are interested in this topic will find this a very, very informational and useful podcast. So thank you so much for your insights. And that is all from all of us here today at the Insights Lounge. I'm going to leave Sandesh Ji's LinkedIn link in the comments box. So if you want to reach out to him, feel free to reach out to him. For more such content, please like, subscribe. If you have any questions, please leave them below and we'll try to answer them. Thank you so much, and we'll meet you in another episode.
Thank you, Kanika. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Thanks.